model program of college football. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down all the teams in the Power 5 plus the major independents. We're going conference by conference. When we get a conference done, then we do a big wrap-up live stream, so look out for those. We knocked out the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and had a whole lot of fun hearing from you. We are in the midst of running down the ACC. When we get each conference done and knock out the major independents as well, I will have a big college football playoff prediction show, special, live stream. And it's kind of appropriate that I mentioned that during this video because we're talking about the Clemson Tigers. 12-2 last year, 7-1 in the ACC. They have in recent years, starting in 2015, wrestled the conference power away from Florida State. Think about how dominant the Seminoles were in 2013 and 14 with Jameis Winston at quarterback. Jimbo Fisher had them on top of the ACC securely, and they would play Clemson, and Clemson would look ready for the game and ready to challenge, and Florida State would knock them right back down. But then came Deshaun Watson and Clemson and Dabo Swinney and that team in 2015, and they wrestled it away, and they haven't given it back. 2015, 16, and 17 ACC champions, and the model program in college football, because they don't have the tradition of Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, others who are playing at a high level, Bama and Ohio State at least, to lean back on. This has been built as a good football program traditionally. They did win a national championship in 1981, but it's typically been, go through the records through the 80s and 90s and up until about 5 years ago, it's been a 8-4, 7-5, 9-3, 7-5, 6-6, 8-4, 7. That's what it's been. It's been a fringe top 25 program. I would be willing to bet that if you went from the mid-80s up until 7 or 8 years ago, that Clemson typically did not finish in the top 25, finished more times outside the top 25 at the end of the season than they did ranked. That's a little homework project for one of you. All right. Then came on Dabo Swinney. The administration, the athletic department, poured money and invested into the football program. They hired the right guy, and now this is the program. This is the program. Again, not that it's the best program in the nation, but it's a model for the likes of other programs around the country that can say, we don't have to be Notre Dame, Alabama, Ohio State. We don't have to have that tradition, that prestige to build a brand and to build a winning culture like Clemson. Well, last year they missed their goal, their mark of getting to the college football championship game and winning it as they had in 2016. What was the difference? Pretty easy. Deshaun Watson's a legend. He's one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. Kelly Bryant, a decent quarterback. I think he took a beating, not just from Alabama, but took a beating from guys like myself and others who really downed his play against Alabama. That was a tough go for him. No, he didn't play well in the semifinal, but he didn't have a whole lot of help. During the season, he did what he needed to do, considering the defense that carried this team. 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, completed 66% of his passes, and that first challenge game of sorts against Louisville early last season, he came out and he made throws downfield, and I thought, okay, this might be the guy. Kelly Bryant might be able to not replace Deshaun Watson, but be a guy that can maintain the running game from the quarterback position, make the short throw, but also beat the defense downfield and make the throws that burn a defense and keep them honest. But he wasn't able to sustain that, and he really didn't develop that part of his game. So we saw what we saw against Alabama, 2 meaningless field goals, and it's 24-6 loss. So people are clamoring for the new stud, Trevor Lawrence, #1 quarterback in the nation, who had a great spring by all accounts. I don't know that it's that obvious a call, though. I think Kelly Bryant will be the starter. But if he doesn't play well during the season and they continue to win games, let's say Clemson's 9-0, but Kelly Bryant's completing 53% of his passes and not making the throws downfield, does Dabo Swinney make the call that you know what? I could play it conservatively and say, hey, he's winning games. We stay with the guy who wins the games. Or we're 9-0, but this isn't going to be good enough against fill in the blank, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, whoever, in the playoffs. Could be interesting because this team was the number 2 rated offense in the country, not by the round numbers, the large numbers, the traditional stats, but the advanced metrics under Deshaun Watson in 2016. The number 2 offense in college football, it dropped all the way to 45th last year. They were only, this is mind-boggling, maybe the most unbelievable stat that I've come across in my research. Clemson was 109th in the nation in first down effectiveness. And that was with the great running backs that they have. Talk about Travis Etienne, who is the best and most explosive back by all the advanced metrics in the NCAA. 7.2 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns. Tavian Feaster ran for 669 and 7 touchdowns. He's just as good, basically. Most scouts would say Etienne's a little bit better. Adam Choice, a third option there at running back, a really good player. Clemson has 76 offensive line starts back, led by Mitch Hyatt, who's one of the best in the nation, and more blue chippers on the way. I guess the best case example would be Jackson Carman, who had committed to Ohio State, reversing his decision and coming to Clemson, the best tackle in high school football in the 2018 class. All right, no Deion Kane, no Ray McCloud, but we know the track record of Clemson wide receivers in recent years has been outstanding, best in college football. T. Higgins, Amari Rogers only caught 17 and 19 passes last year, but they showed us enough that they could be emerging stars. I especially like T. Higgins. A lot of people like Amari Rogers. Take your pick. Tomato. They're both explosive, talented, freakish players. Hunter Renfro's the guy that doesn't look like he belongs out there, but he belongs more than anybody else out there. He is a gamer. Defensive line, best in college football. It's not even close. And that's with Alabama, Auburn, Ohio State, Georgia. Who else has a big defensive front? But this was the best and will be the best this year. There's no question. This is still trying to sink in as well. Sports Illustrated named its top 100 players. Okay, out of its top 10, it listed 3 Clemson defensive linemen. So think about how dominant it would be to have 3 of the top 10 defensive linemen in the country. But Clemson, by some estimates, Sports Illustrated and others, 3 of the top 10 players in the country playing on the Clemson defensive front. Cleveland Farrell, he had 66 tackles, 18 tackles for loss and 9.5 sacks. Christian Wilkins, 60 tackles, 9 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. Dexter Lawrence, of course, a tremendous player. Austin Bryant, 15.5 tackles for loss and 8.5 sacks. And they actually have, count them, 7 4 and 5 stars behind these guys on the defensive front that they've recruited. It's crazy. All right, at linebacker, we've got Kendall Joseph. He had 96 tackles and 5 tackles for loss. J.D. Davis with 56 stops. Trey Lamar had 50 tackles, and James Scalzi had 31. Defensive backfield, Mark Fields only played 6 games, half the season, less than half the season, but he had the big pick against South Carolina that got Clemson rolling in that route. A.J. Terrell's a really good player. Trayvon Mullen had 3 picks. Isaiah Simmons had 45 tackles, and Tanner Muse had 57 tackles. What's wrong with the special teams at Clemson? They must just think they're so good at offense and defense that they don't have to play special teams, because the special teams, even in winning championships, was a sore spot, and it was again last season. All right, let's get to the schedule at Clemson. They go to Texas A&M early in the season in September. Maybe the crowd's hyped. Jimbo's got the boys playing, ready to play, ready to fight, and maybe it's a game for a quarter and a half, maybe into the second half. But there's no way that Texas A&M stays with Clemson. I just can't see, not just based on talent differential, but this Clemson team knows that this is going to be a challenge. They'll be up for the game. They'll understand that they're going to get the Aggies' best shot. And these guys have played in so many big games that they'll be ready. They've got a date with South Carolina late in the season. They have embarrassed South Carolina in recent years. And of course, in 2015 and 16, those Gamecock teams were not good. They only won 3 in 6 games, but last year they were good. And Clemson still just annihilated them. All right. Clemson goes 11-1, 7-1 in the ACC. So you instantly say, Mark, who do they lose to? Let's recall that we just can't go game by game by game by game because Clemson's significantly better than everybody in the conference. So they should win every game. And would I be shocked if they went 8-0 and 12-0? No. But for prediction's sake, I'm saying that they're going to lose to somebody, and it's going to be in the ACC. I would think about an upset outside of conference, maybe if they had to travel to South Carolina. But I think at home they still have plenty to knock off the Gamecocks. So they lose a game in the ACC. Remember Pitt 2 years ago. Remember Syracuse last season. They've got a date at Florida State. And if they lose that one, that's the one team that has the potential to say, okay, we got a game up on Clemson. Now Florida State has to lose 2 games to get knocked out of the ACC championship game. 2 games in conference. So that would be fascinating if they lose at Tallahassee. And then suddenly we have what we didn't expect, and that's a race in the ACC Atlantic. So I say between the Florida State game and then the collection of Louisville, NC State, BC, and Wake, that Clemson drops 1 game in the ACC. I don't believe it's going to be on the other side of the league where they play, I believe, Duke and Georgia Tech. Going to win those games. All right, there it is for Clemson football. 11-1, 7-1 in the ACC. You would think, unless they get upset in the ACC championship game, and we will make that prediction later, that they are set for the college football playoff once again for a 4th consecutive season. Would love to hear your prediction on Clemson football here for 2018. Leave it down in the comments section. Right here on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.